good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be on the planet. Welcome to another edition of Football Picks here on TalkingSports.tv. As usual, I'm Marty York, and joining me from his home office in San Diego, California, is our good man, Uncle Ben from UncleBen'sFootball.com. Ben, how are you this week?
I'm good, Marty, and how's everybody up there in Toronto doing?
Well, we're warm at this moment. The weekend is going to be ultra cold, but at this very moment, we're probably a little warmer here than you are in San Diego, believe it or not.
Well, that is true right now. We're having a little cold snap here. It's in the mid-50s here. It's sunny, but mid-50s, and, people here in California are not accustomed to this type of weather. They're walking around in scarves, jackets. They got the Uggs going, and this is their chance to expand their wardrobe, I think, down here, for a couple of days, and get into some other styles of clothing. That's all.
I laugh because it's a totally different mentality to what we're accustomed to here in Canada. But anyway, I think it's the most exciting time right now when it comes to football. Football should be played in a little bit of frigid weather. I like that. So. I think it's meant for that, and we'll see how things go. A lot of teams are on the bubble right now as we head into Week 14 in the NFL. By the way, I need to mention that your cohort, Handsome Howard Kamen, who did very well last week on his best bets, is absent this week on assignment, so we will carry on without him and do our best. And, of course, I always want to mention right at the outset that Uncle Ben has all his top picks for you, all his advising and everything else right there on his website, UncleBen'sFootball.com. Go to it and get good tips on what to do with your picks this weekend. Before we get into the NFL, Uncle Ben, there was a game last week at the college level involving a team that at that time was ranked number one, a team that many predicted would not lose a game all season, a team that some said was good enough to play in the NFL. And I'm talking, of course, about Alabama under Nick Saban. Auburn pulls that game out on the last play when Alabama misses a very long field goal attempt. A game for sure that will last in our memories for a very long time. And it just changed everything in the NCAA picture right now, didn't it?
Well, yeah, Marty. I mean, this was an iconic ending to a football game. It's just something you're going to see basically for the rest of your life on highlight reels everywhere across the nation when it comes to football highlights, that's for sure. Even sports highlights. I mean, fantastic endings. That could be number one ever. But, up there, Joe Carter's home run, I can equate it to something like that. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Changed the national picture dramatically, actually, giving Ohio State Buckeyes an opportunity to perhaps get into the BCS championship game now, although they're in tough this week as well, playing the Michigan State Spartans. We'll get into that in a little bit. But, it dropped down, and now that 1-2 Florida State, Ohio State are 1-2. If they win their games this weekend, they're certainly going to play in the big game. But the SEC championship game with Auburn and Missouri, they have something to say about it, those teams. If Ohio State slips up, I do believe the winner of that SEC championship game will get in to the national championship game against Florida State, because I don't see Florida State losing to the Duke Blue Devils, Marty. I just don't see that happening. They're 29-point favorites in that game. It'd probably be one of the biggest upsets in college football history, so I don't see that happening.
Right.
But yeah, it did change things up. I mean, the way it all played out in the end, Alabama, I'm sure you saw the game, the last 2.5, 3 minutes, they had like a 28, 29-yard field goal to basically go up 10 points. Mm-hmm. Auburn blocked that kick, which gave them an opportunity. Obviously, they went down. They tied the game at 28-all. Alabama gets the ball back. The game was apparently over, actually, going into overtime. The announcers actually said, this game is over. We're going to be going overtime. Nick Saban forced the replay. 1 second was put back on the clock. Like you said, a 57-yard field goal, which in college football, these guys are dicey at best, these kickers.
Yeah, I thought it was a questionable call by Saban.
Right. Goes for the kick. And the Alabama guys were just sort of watching the kick. They were just sort of looking at it to see, and they really weren't set up for defense.
Right.
And honestly, that was a great call by the Auburn special teams coach, because they had that wall set up on the left side. They knew exactly what to do. And by the time their guy hit their own 40-yard line, he was gone. And it was just a bizarre ending to a fantastic football game. Like I said, you're going to see that one forever. I mean, Marty, I'm still in disbelief, shaking my head when I think about it.
Yeah, it was a hell of a finish. Auburn ends up winning 34-28 because they couldn't even get the extra point off when 80,000 people rushed on the field in jubilation. But, you see those returns off missed field goal attempts often in the Canadian Football League. It's actually a regular occurrence. You don't see it, not so much in American football. So, yeah, that's something that'll be engraved in our memory banks forever. And I do blame Nick Saban for A, trying that field goal from way out there, and B, not preparing his players to defense, as you said, this possible return. They were just standing around. We'll get to more college football, Uncle Ben, at the end. You've got a good pick regarding Ohio State and some others, so you have some gems. So, folks, stay tuned for Uncle Ben's college picks later on. He's been on fire with his college picks. But let's get back to the NFL because this is really where things start taking shape in the NFL. A playoff picture is sort of coming into focus now. One game last week that really showed that maybe New Orleans isn't quite as efficient as we might have thought. It really stands out. This was the Monday night game, and Seattle walloped the Saints. It wasn't even close. It was all Seattle. And New Orleans, at that time, Drew Brees went in that game never losing on a Monday night. I think he was 8-0 or something like this. And New Orleans looked awful. You called Seattle to win and cover that game, Ben, and that's what happened, and it was done easily. But let me ask you, does New Orleans now look like maybe they're not as for real as we thought?
Well, the Seattle Seahawks had it all going last Monday night. Everything went their way at the beginning of that game, and it almost looked like in the second half, New Orleans knew they were beaten.
Yeah.
Like the week before, Denver played. This was I thought it was going to play out a little more similar to the Denver-New England game, where New England got down 24-0 at the half, and they came back in the second half. It was a similar situation here. I thought maybe Drew Brees could bring it back. Okay, but then this Seattle defense was all over them. He didn't have time no time. Like, if you can't protect, I don't care who your quarterback is. Okay, they just can't. You can't seem to get it done. Seattle was very high. They were really up for this game. It showed on the scoreboard. They were all over them. Their secondary is, the best in the NFL. And the Saints really looked kind of flat at the beginning of the game. And once they got behind, they just didn't seem like they were. They sort of believed that they couldn't come back. I don't know. It showed. And they actually took Drew Brees out early in the fourth quarter, right, as basically in a give-up mode. Yeah. In an NFL game, you don't normally see that when you're only down by 3 touchdowns and you got Drew Brees as your quarterback. You never know. Stuff happens out there. But they sort of gave up in that game. Yes, the Hawks look smart. They look like the team to beat, no question about it. I think they're in tough this week, actually, Seattle, going to meet their division rivals, San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, Uncle Ben.
Sure.
So Seattle goes into Frisco. The 49ers and Colin Kaepernick are favored by 3 points at home. Does Seattle have a little bit of a letdown against the 49ers? Because they've really owned the 49ers ever since Russell Wilson has taken over at quarterback. And, man, is he efficient. He was absolutely dominant, doing whatever he felt like doing against New Orleans on Monday night. Can he do that again against San Francisco? Because Seattle, with Russell Wilson, has really dominated since last year against San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely, and earlier in the season up in Seattle.
Right.
But San Francisco is one of these teams that, even though they're in the wild card position right now at 8-4, they've got the Philadelphia Eagles breathing down their neck at 7-5, and the Arizona Cardinals breathing down their neck at 7-5. They need this game, and I think the bookmakers have tipped their hat in this one, Marty, because we just discussed, Seattle looked like world beaters on Monday night against what we thought was that was going to be a very highly competitive game, and they just blew them out. And the bookmakers have made San Francisco a 3-point favorite here, and I tend to listen to the bookmakers. That means they're telling me, because people are going to be all over Seattle in that game, Marty.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't see people pounding San Francisco 49ers after what they just witnessed last week with the Seattle Seahawks. So I like San Francisco there. It's not an official play, but I would definitely take a leaner on San Francisco. They lost 38-7 or some high number. I don't have the exact score to these exact Seahawks week 2 or 3 when they had those 2 blowout losses, as we discussed earlier in our shows, against Indy and Seattle in back-to-back weeks. The Niners suffered, and we said that was the best thing that happened to the Niners. I think Harbaugh's going to have his team a little pumped up for this one, and maybe Seattle won't be as pumped up as they were last week. They don't play on the road nearly as well as they do at home. Big revenge spot for the Niners. And I think San Francisco's going to get it done this week, Marty.
All right, so there you go, folks. There's pick number 1 from Uncle Ben on our segments this week. He is saying he's leaning. It's not a huge pick or anything like that. He's not saying go spend a lot of money on this, but he's leaning towards San Francisco minus the 3 against Seattle, who'll have a short week of rest since they played Monday night. Now, New Orleans also, similarly, will have a short week. They're at home, and they're favored by, I see 3 right now, against Carolina. Carolina and Cam Newton, Uncle Ben, have been playing very well. Do you have any thoughts about this game, Carolina getting 3 in New Orleans?
Well, this is the first of 2 meetings for these teams over a 3-week period coming up now, Marty. These teams, Carolina can still win the division if they can sweep these games against New Orleans. They're actually tied with the Saints right now, right?
Right.
Both teams are at 9-3. They're both in good playoff positions. Both these teams will be in the playoffs. Like we said, I don't really have a pick on the side in this game, Marty, but I do like the total. I'll tell you why. Just because the Saints looked horrid last week, like we just said. They scored 7 points, and they were never really in the game. Things will be different this week because I just don't see. I know that the Panthers' defense has been super strong, and they look fantastic, but I don't see how you can hold Drew Brees down to 7 or 14 points 2 weeks in a row, especially after he looked last week terrible. They're coming back to the comforts of the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I just see them putting up 20 to 30 points in this game. I don't see how you can hold them down. And so that's going to force the Panthers to put some points up on the board themselves against maybe a defense like we talked about, maybe New Orleans. Their defense maybe isn't quite as good as we thought it was. Maybe they were exposed a little last week up in Seattle. And Russell Wilson and Cam Newton are similar type quarterbacks. They can run this similar type of plays that seemed to work last week quite well against Rob and his defense. So I see both teams going into the 20s, or somebody's going to have to score 27 points or 30 points to win this game, I think, Marty. So I like the over 45. This is an official pick on Uncle Ben's site. I like over 45 in this game because I don't see how you can keep New Orleans down 2 weeks in a row, and I think Carolina's going to know that, and they're going to have to respond to be in the game. And I see this being a high-scoring football game down in Louisiana this week.
All right, there you go, folks. Pick number 2 from Uncle Ben. And that's taking the over in the New Orleans game. Over. He's Uncle Ben Walderman from UncleBen'sFootball.com. Hey, go sign up to UncleBen'sFootball.com. You get all of his picks, and you're likely to like it. We're going to take a break. When we return, more NFL talk here on Football Picks at TalkingSports.tv. Don't go away.